Mr. President, as I rise to speak for the first time tonight, I am conscious of what an honour it is to be here, in this chamber, in this Australia's oldest parliament, and I admit to being a little overwhelmed by the privilege which is being afforded to me. In preparing to speak tonight, I have been reflecting on the nature of this institution, the Legislative Council, which will celebrate its 200th anniversary next year, and the changes which have occurred over that period. This House began as an advisory body to the Governor, drawn entirely from the colonial elite. And while their presence cloaked executive government in the semblance of broader consultation, I doubt that the Governor was often troubled or challenged by their advice. Through legislation, this Legislative Council was transformed seamlessly into a House of Review in a bicameral system, although in the 1850s its membership was still firmly the preserve of the squattocracy. This chamber was to undergo further change and challenges in the form of attempts at abolition until it became what it is today, an elected representative chamber and an important part of our Westminster system. We are perhaps so used to hearing this story of the peaceful transformation of all our institutions, planted by the British but growing over time into their uniquely Australian forms, that we do not appreciate the strength of these institutions and the importance of the values which underlie them. We have the privilege of living in a strong parliamentary democracy where power is truly in the hands of the people, and that power is transferred peacefully at election times. I am deeply honoured to be standing here today because I was trusted by the people of New South Wales at the last election to represent them. And I will always respect that trust which has been placed in me. Our robust democracy is only possible in a society based on respect for the individual and the acknowledgement that each member of society, whatever their views, whatever their background, whatever their skills, is equal and has equal dignity and worth, and that their voices should all be heard. Democracy requires us to protect the fundamental freedoms of thought, worship, speech and association. It also requires that we do not fetishise these freedoms and make them ends unto themselves. When we live in society with each other, no freedom is absolute. The right to exercise freedoms entails the responsibility to exercise them well, recognising the rights and needs of others. But the need to protect these freedoms is absolute. For democracy to thrive, we need the freedom to think and to express those thoughts. This Parliament is important because it is the home of robust debate where thoughts and ideas are exchanged freely. This debate adds to our democracy and helps refine and improve our policies. We need this same freedom in all of our public spaces. Being exposed to the ideas of others will never harm us, but being deprived of the opportunity to have our own ideas tested or challenged will. Our institutions have changed and developed because there was robust social and political discussion, which continues to this day and will help drive further change. We've all changed our views about some matters, I hope, because we have continued to discuss and refine and reflect on a variety of issues. Free and mutually respectful debate is essential to the development of individuals and societies. And if we shut down these freedoms of thought and expression, we will ultimately harm ourselves. We should never fear hearing things with which we disagree, or be frightened to speak clearly for fear of offending others. We need to cultivate this robust and respectful exchange of ideas because this creates a stronger society and encourages peaceful and beneficial change. All of the changes to this Legislative Council, from an elite group of appointed men discussing matters of the day with the Governor, to a truly representative democratic House where a woman, not from the squattocracy, can be elected to serve, was achieved by talking. There was no revolution, Mr. President. There was no armed conflict. There was rather extensive and ongoing discussion, several reviews, much legislation and a referendum. In strong democracies, we move forward by sharing and exchanging our ideas, and we need more free debate, not less. Totalitarian societies regulate freedom of thought and expression. Strong democracies do not. I was attracted to the Liberal Party at university because of its defence of our democracy, our constitutional monarchy, and our basic freedoms. I share the core values of the Liberal Party and believe that we will be stronger as a society if these values find expression in government policy. In common with the Liberal Party, I believe in a society where individuals can flourish and risk and hard work are rewarded. I believe that strong families are the greatest resource we have as a society and that family life should be encouraged. And I believe that government should provide the broad infrastructure in which we are all able to make individual choices and thrive, rather than seek to micromanage our lives. I also believe that the choices we make need to be tempered by respect for others and a recognition that we all live in society together, governed by the rule of law. I've been proud to see how successive Liberal governments have sought to enshrine and advance these values. I look forward to working for all of the people of New South Wales, a privilege which we have in this House, but I'm particularly excited to work with the people in the Southern Country, having been entrusted with this responsibility by the Liberal Party. The criticism is often raised that New South Wales is simply not NSW, Newcastle, Sydney and Wollongong. And indeed, all of us who have travelled in the south of this state and seen the productive capacity of the riverina in both food and fibre, experienced the beauty of the snowy mountains, travelled along our southern coastline and enjoyed the great tourism opportunities and the wonderful oysters, and experienced the entrepreneurial spirit which is alive in the farms, the forest, the small businesses, the manufacturing enterprises, the small towns and the cities in the south, would know what great contributions these individuals and families make to our state. And you would also be aware that they face great challenges, especially access to water, to healthcare and to education. And of course, the ever-present roads, transport, and the challenge of Brown Mountain. I commit to being mindful to the needs of all of our citizens and representing the interests of all of New South Wales, including Narrandera, the South Coast and Wagga Wagga. I'm honoured today by the presence of so many of my family members, including the newest star in our family circle. My family was like so many others, nothing extraordinary. I was raised in suburban Sydney in the classic red brick house, which even had a white front fence, until that is it got in the way of the neighbourhood cricket games and as a hazard to fielders needed to be sacrificed. My siblings and I knew that we were loved because we saw each day how committed in love our parents were to each other, to each of us, and to God. We never talked about this, of course, but we witnessed it daily in acts of sacrifice, self-denial, and giving to others. It was an ordinary family life because in so many ways it was typical of the way in which so many of us were raised. I wish this type of upbringing, with the solid foundation for life which it provides, was the birthright of every child. But I recognise that it is not. And as a society in which we care about each other, we need to hold out our hands and catch those in need. But I am concerned that our families are another of our great social institutions which, like our democracy, seem only to draw our attention when they are troubled. Are we perhaps so familiar with family life that we have stopped recognising the important work which happens in families? That day in, day out love offered by parents to each other and to their children, expressed in practical gifts of self, may seem simple and mundane, but it has extraordinary results. Families quite literally create the next generation. They nurture and increase our social capital. They heal us, they encourage us, they challenge us to become productive, outward-looking citizens. Families give us the security to take risks and become entrepreneurs, and families are our first and most important educators. Through the example of service we receive as children, we learn how to be of service to others in the community. We've just celebrated Mother's Day, and a wonderful occasion it was. But if we're serious about valuing families and the work done by parents, We need to move away from tokenism and place functioning families at the centre of all of our policy making. For example, housing policy must be family friendly and provide for the elbow room and the play space needed by growing families. We have a housing shortage, not just in Sydney but throughout the regions. But a panicky response focusing on bed count and not families is no real solution. Simply building the promised high-rise boxes does not provide the space and the community which families need to thrive. If there is no room to kick a soccer ball around, then FIFA 23 on the Xbox becomes the realistic alternative for our kids. The dark bedroom and the PlayStation is the only option if we phase out the backyard. Is this really the society we want to build? We need to learn from the mistakes of the past and not build now what will become the troubled housing estates of the future. Adequate housing policy requires a mix of some high-rise but lots of open space, especially backyard space, where children can explore and imagine and risk and families can recharge. We must be building communities, not just tower blocks, and so schools and other services such as transport must also be readily available. In education, we face many challenges, but the place at which all education policy should start is with respect for the role of the family as the primary educator of children, and schools and parents need to work together for better outcomes for our children. We talk a lot about infrastructure in this place. We need good infrastructure, not for its own sake, but so that families can spend less time commuting and more time at home together. Active, creative kids are positive goals, which deserve our recognition and our support in tangible ways. And we need to honour and recognise those who make spending time engaged in family life a priority. Like so many women, Mr. President, I have worked all my life, and sometimes I've been paid for it. I have held challenging legal roles and exciting posts in tertiary education, but in common with so many other women, both the most valuable and I fear the least respected work I have ever done is in my family. It would often amaze me that if I answered mother to the occupation question, I would be dismissed. But if I styled myself as domestic capital manager, a fancier way of saying exactly the same thing, I was immediately of interest. Surely it is well and truly time to challenge that false stereotype that the only way we contribute anything of value and that we acquire worthwhile skills is when we exchange work for money. This particularly impacts on women who traditionally have spent more time in family and service roles, but should be an issue for each and every one of us. If feminism was meant to be about empowering women to have agency over their lives and to be able to make choices, then why do we still seem to be valuing some choices more highly than others? All those who serve others, in whatever capacity, contribute to our society and should be respected for their service, not dismissed if their real work is not counted in the GDP. Tonight, I feel I have the privilege and the opportunity to honour my own parents, and I recognise that I would not be here tonight without their love, their support, and their consistent example of service. On my last day of Year 10, my father and I walked up to the station together, as we often did. He to work, me to school. On the platform, he turned to me and said he'd forgotten something and needed to go home. He didn't want me to worry because our routine was being broken. I learned later that day that he went home because he was experiencing a major heart attack. And in the days before mobile phones, he was seeking medical attention. But unfortunately, dropped dead on the bed. I often reflect that my father, literally as he was dying, put others before himself. His last words to me were pure love and pure service. This is an extreme example perhaps, but typical of the way that he lived his whole life and how we all experienced family life, and is typical of many fathers and mothers and the day in, day out loving sacrifice, which is one of the great strengths of family life. My mother left a young widow with 4 children, the foundation stone of her life gone, carried on in love. She often described our family as a joint enterprise she had embarked upon with my father, which now fell to her to finish. And she provided for us financially, spiritually, emotionally, and in every way she could. They both surrounded us with love, offered us tremendous examples of service, and challenged us to use any gifts we had for others. If I have achieved any success I have in life, it is because of them, and I am deeply grateful. Education was an enormous value in our family. The key expectation was that we would apply ourselves and keep learning and growing. My mother was a librarian, with the very happy consequence that we were always surrounded by books. My entire school education was entrusted to the nuns, and I owe a deep debt of gratitude to the Catholic education system, especially the Sisters of the Good Samaritan. We are used today to thinking in terms of jobs, but I had the good fortune to be educated by women who had answered a vocation. They were not working for themselves, but had answered a call to love and to serve, and encouraged all of us to do the same. It was never a question of doing well. The issue was always, had you done your best? Which of course is different for every person according to their various gifts and talents. The answer was never, what have you achieved? But had you offered to God the best that you could? To be educated in this environment of challenge, which encouraged us to strive to be our best selves, not for ourselves, but for others, and to do this with the lived example of the Sisters of the Good Samaritan, was an exciting way to navigate the often choppy waters of high school, and gave me gifts which I still enjoy today. And I would particularly like to acknowledge Sister Teresita Sexton and Sister Marilyn Kelleher for their example, their encouragement, and for driving all of us to give much more than we ever realised that we could. And of course, I'm not alone in benefiting from this excellent education. I was delighted to discover that the first female Liberal member of this House, Mrs. Mabel Furley, was also educated by the Sisters of the Good Samaritan at St Scholastica's College. Education requires learning facts and mastering information, but it is much more. It is the process of learning how to think about those facts and to use them. And it is also the process of learning about yourself and rising to the challenge which education provides. A lawyer by profession, I have had the privilege of working in tertiary education for many years and experienced the power of education both in my own life and the lives of others. Most recently, I have served as the Director of the Law Extension Committee of the University of Sydney. This program provides the teaching for the Legal Profession Admission Board's Diploma in Law, of which I'm proud to say many outstanding alumni are graduates, including the new Attorney General. This is a program which exemplifies the opportunities of education: broad admission, high expectations, rigorous standards, and exciting results. Open to students from all walks of life, it produces outstanding legal practitioners. And I would like to recognise all my former colleagues for the great work they do, and commend the University of Sydney for their ongoing involvement in this program, which provides access and opportunity for so many to enter the law. I have spoken about family tonight, but the other great F in my life has been friendship. I'm honoured tonight to have people in this gallery who've known me since I was 12, which is a particularly long time to have to put up with me. I'm also honoured by the presence of so many of my friends from the Liberal Party, to whom I am very grateful for their ongoing encouragement and support. And present tonight, there are also members of the Browning Pack who sustain me through university, my fellow devotees of the tea ceremony, the coffee therapy group, the Saturday coffee group, and the luncheon club. And yes, I acknowledge there is a theme, but there is also a deep and abiding blessing in friendship. Friendships which sustain and nurture, and when needed, challenge us to lift or to rethink, and on occasions provide very helpful styling advice. In closing, I wish to mention my own children. As a parent of young children, it is a delight to see them acquiring skills and meeting milestones. But as the mother of two of the brightest and kindest and best young adults in our society, objectively determined, no bias involved, it is the deepest of pleasures to see them navigating life, overcoming challenges with resilience and grace, making wise decisions, good friendships, and offering service to others. We all have difficulties in our life, some more than others, and while as a mother it is heartbreaking to see your children face these issues, it is joyous to see them triumph. I regard my children as the greatest of my life's very many blessings, and I'm immensely proud of the adults that they have become. And I thank Mr. President, the members of this House, for their courtesy tonight.